Communication is key. This is what we are told for all of our relationships. Communication is supposed to be the heart of romantic relationships, friendships, work relationships, so on and so forth. But communication is really hard. It's not as simple as saying your feelings anymore. It's not as simple as communicating them physically or through a love letter. Now with social media, you have to worry about communication on a broader spectrum. You don't just have to worry about creating a lovely card for your sweetheart, but now you have to worry about crafting a tweet.
Well said.
Thank you.
Fucking times have changed. I think at least now it's a lot more impulsive when it comes to communicating. Whereas if you wanted to write a letter in the past, you had to sit down and really articulate yourself. And if it sounded like shit, you'd crumble it up, throw it away, work on the next draft. Whereas now the 160 characters or 240 or whatever it is now, or even a Facebook post, it's a lot more impulsive, like in the moment. So there's no time to really think anymore or to communicate that. And same thing with texting too, because when you're having a conversation, like a face-to-face conversation with somebody, like you wouldn't pause for 5 minutes to respond like you would to respond to a text. So it's almost like you can't have that open air when you are texting with people.
Yeah, and I really do, as someone who really thinks about how to respond to a lot, like not to the average text message, but especially if I'm putting something out on social media, like an article, I'm always really careful, like reread my thoughts before I put them out there, which I really like. But it obviously, I think when your focus is on having that dead air between responses, it can make communication harder, because when you're in the moment with somebody, it's more difficult. You have to do all of that editing internally at a much faster rate than like typing things out and rewriting it on your Facebook or whatever.
Yeah, the worst part is when you think it's gonna start some shit.
Oh, like when, yeah, no. And like, that's why, especially I try to, if I'm going to release an article that talks about something political or something I believe in, I try to make it as like to the point, direct, non-inflammatory as possible. But that also is, I don't know, on the one hand, I feel like I'm doing PR for myself so I don't get flamed. And on the other hand, it's like it's a good exercise in communication. And like, how do you make something effective for all audiences? And like, how do I present myself as an orator so I am heard to the most amount of people? I feel like that was an art form for so long, and it really has been lost in the age of kind of like shit posting, firestorming, rage tweeting back and forth. I don't know. I really question if that's authentic communication. Definitely not.
It reminds me a lot of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Ooh, in what way?
Like the original book. Is your mic around?
Yeah, I just realized I was back here and I should be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, I can cut that out. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the Mary Shelley Frankenstein book. Like, not the movie where Robert De Niro was like, huh? You want fuck my wife? I'm a monster, huh? But, in the book, the mob, like the entire town is out to get the monster. Mm-hmm. And despite the monster's best intentions, the fucking city or the town wants to kill him alive. And the monster is kind of like us, or at least our ideas. Because, like the Dr. Frankenstein assembled all of these dead parts to make one, like, living thing. Mm-hmm. So if you think of it, that's kind of like our thoughts. Let's just say you post an article like on gun control or Trump or whatever the political climate is. Like, what you're really doing is you're making a monster, mm-hmm. and then you're letting it loose on the town. So it'll either be embraced or it'll either be terrorized. Mm-hmm. So, the townspeople are reacting to the monster in a way. So whenever you post on something online, or even if it's like an articulated post that's like your own words, you're essentially creating the monster, and everybody else on Facebook is the mob. There's a certain mob mentality, like where everybody has a pitchfork, everybody has a torch, and we all group together. And when we sniff weakness, like the rules are completely different. If somebody fucks up on Facebook, you can totally jump on them and that's acceptable.
Yeah. The space for civility has like really decreased, or I should say like people thinking about like decorum or like how to approach a difficult subject. It's so crazy. I think on our last episode we talked about that too, how there was on Being podcast after the 2016 presidential election in the United States, there was an episode about making space for decorum and civility, because if we're going to have these difficult conversations and have authentic communication, that's a part of it. I think one thing that I've always been told or heard is that timing is everything with communication. Like, let's say you're in a relationship with someone and there's like an issue you need to talk about. The timing of when you choose to talk about that issue is really everything to see when it will be perceived, or I should say, when your partner will accept it the most. So like, for example, if you need to talk to your partner about something arbitrary, like, could you do the dishes more? The time to do that is not like when you walk into the room and all the dishes are like there and it's in a huge pile and you become a screaming, raging mess and then decide to talk about this thing that's been bothering you with your partner and the dishes. It's probably something like a better time, like when the dishes are done or something like that, and you can look at your partner and say like, oh, like, thank you for doing that. You know, I've been thinking about, you know, you and the dishes and you needing to do them more. It's so arbitrary. The point is, timing is everything.
It really is. And it can really make or break, you know, the relationship. And there's also a matter of tact as well.
Oh yeah, tact is a huge part of communication. Especially
like with social media, like there's just no fucking tact anymore. Because no matter what you say, you're always creating that monster.
Yeah, well, and I think the reason there is no tact is because there is the mob mentality. Like, you don't have, whatever you do, even if you have tact and decorum and civility, people will perceive it as like weakness, or that they just won't accept it. So I feel like, again, though, like, that's not authentic communication. Like, when I think of communication, I think of, like, interpersonal, you know, two people in a room talking, or an authentic exchange. I don't know, just, there's something so artificial. Like, you've talked about how, like competing monologues is what social media is. It's not a dialogue, and I agree 1,000%. So, I don't know, it just really... I really struggle with the idea that that's authentic communication, or that's what communication will be.
Yeah. It also, there's a facade of, I don't know how to articulate this or if it's even right, but the way I feel about hashtags and movements, like, it doesn't matter what the movement is. It just seems like somebody else is advertising it. Therefore, it's theirs to gain more than ours. Because within the culture, it seems like we talk about it only when it's happening. And then a few months later, we jump on to the next thing. So what did we really get from just seeing that? Mm-hmm. You know, like, there's no discussion. There's just an advertisement for discussion. So, like, even when we're talking right now, like, you brought up some good points. Like, you know, I'm saying things a lot differently in front of you because I'm also gauging, like, your body language. Like, so for instance, like, if I'm going too far, if I'm saying something, so I know exactly, like, where my boundaries are because I have a person in front of me to gauge that. And Same thing, you do the same as you. Like, if I start squirming when you're talking about something, or if I, like, make a weird face, or if I'm just like, fuck, you know, I can make that fuck look with my eyes, and you know that that's messed up. I don't need a response to say it's fucked up.
Yeah, and that's partially why I love and hate being an expressive person, is because people know instantly how I'm feeling. Like, I'm really concerned, like, at work sometimes people, like, colleagues will say something and then they can instantly read on my face how I feel, which is not good.
Yeah.
But that's, like, my biggest fear. And it also, like, massive communication, problems is when you don't have an expressive partner, or when you can't read somebody, like, they're so stoic that you have no clue how your words are being perceived. Of course, there's tact within watching to make sure that your face isn't expressive or, like, giving away how you feel, but also when there's someone who's, like, you can't gauge that how they're perceiving your ideas, like, they just have a blank face until they get to talk. That's, like, my worst fear, because I'm like, am I saying, are you listening? Like, how do tell me how you're feeling about this before you start talking. I'm so worried that I'm saying things and you don't agree with them.
Yeah, it's because you're putting stock into not only what you're saying, but how it's also received.
Yeah, which maybe, I was about to say maybe I shouldn't do, but no, I think you should care about how it's going to be perceived.
Right.
And that's all about, like, there's freedom within not giving a fuck, and then there's also, like, intelligence in knowing, I guess it should be how much fucks to give about how what you're saying is going to be perceived.
Yeah, it would be a lot easier if we all did have this off switch. So, like, for instance, like, to make an analogy, like, let's just say if we genuinely didn't give a shit to the crying kid in the other room, mm-hmm. you know that the kid's there. There's no way to 100% ignore, you know, I don't know, it takes so much training and just, like, mental, like, either, like, just mental, like, training to do that, or you just don't have that emotion in you. Like, if you're mm-hmm. stoic and you're not emotional, you just, either that was just never developed or trained, but... You know, when you want to tell somebody something and when you first realize they might take it the wrong way or it's just going to cause more shit, that's because you give too much of a shit. Not to say that it's definitely not a bad thing. I would say, like, do what you know works for you. So if you feel like you want to say something, I would say you have to say it. You have to let that be brought into existence. Because communication, it's like taking a shit. So... when you really, really, really have to go, when has it ever been helpful to avoid the bathroom?
Yeah, never.
You know, like, of course you don't want to shit on yourself, but that's what it feels like something. Like, when, especially like when what you have to say feels like an emotion. Mm-hmm. So, or when it's based like on an emotional thing. So whether that could be love or hate, or if that's something, hey, like, you really let me down there, or just uncertainty. Those are just all forms of holding in a shit.
Yeah.
And you need to shit every day in order to be healthy. Because if you held in your shit for too long, you would actually die.
This is really true. And actually, you brought up a really good idea with, like, the screaming child. Oftentimes our first form of communication as, like, infants is, like, screaming, crying, giggling, all those things. Like, those, like, basic emoting things. And that's why, again, like, it can be hard with your partner if they're not giving you that thing back. Like, that's like one of the first things you learn how to communicate through is, like, expression, and things like that. And then you progress into language, either verbal or sign language or whatever. Then that grows and becomes, like, the basis of communication. I feel like if we were to talk about, like, the forms of communication, is it only limited to physical, verbal, and or linguistic? Is it only those two? Linguistic or physical?
So physical meaning like body language, or physical meaning like okay, like
demonstrating how you feel through a protest, like that would be physical?
Yeah. So, or like what I like to call the dude apology is they don't say sorry. Like a typical, like a stereotypical dude would never just say sorry. They wouldn't address the issue. They would just change the subject and, like, hope. So, like, hey, yeah, you know, so you want to watch some baseball? You know, like, that's the dude apology. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, like, you know, just do the next thing and then just have it be cool, that's the way of, like, apologizing as opposed to, like, verbalizing it.
Yeah, I think when I meant physical, I meant like when I hug somebody, that means that I'm communicating, like, affection and love to them. Versus, and the same with, like, my facial expression. When I'm smiling, it means I'm happy or I'm joyous or I'm laughing. Or when I am, like, part of a picket line for a protest, like that's also an expression and a form of communication. But I do see what you're saying too. There's always, like, verbal communication that's, like, non-communicative, but it's kind of telling you, like, your example of the stereotypical dude apology is not an apology, but it's communicating the fact that the person wants to, like, move on or change the subject or doesn't want to address what's happening. But again, like, if I was on the receiving end of the dude apology and I had something, like, that I needed to get off my chest and talk about, and that's how it was met, I feel like it would just be, like, burning with me 10 times more that my wanting to communicate was shut down. And I think that's also why people love social media, is because you always have an audience. You like blast it into the abyss and it's out there. You don't have anyone to kind of like not receive it. There's always a willing audience on the Twitter sphere or in Facebook.
Yeah, even if they don't like or comment on your post or retweet it or reblog or whatever the social media platform is, you know that they've at least seen it.
Yeah.
I think if I were to personally define communication, it's anything that lets the world know that you exist.
Interesting. So you're broadening it up to, you think like to exist is to communicate?
Yeah, well, of course. I'm still figuring it out, but as we're talking, but I think if you're alive, you're here, obviously, and you're, interacting with so many people and so many smaller situations, just even in traffic, when I was coming here, I didn't want to be behind the guy that was going 5 miles under the limit. So I just went to the side and then I just sped up, and got in front of him. So that's one way of communication. But the worst thing about communication is when you are trying to and you're not listened to. There was a movie that came out recently called Mother by Darren Aronofsky. I thought that was a brilliant fucking way to show how the mind works when you're not listened to.
Oh, definitely. I only know the premise of the movie and a couple things you and our friend told me when we got coffee that one time with Kelly, who did our logo. But yeah, you kind of described it as a panic attack inducing experience, but the crux of it is the fact that the main character is not listened to by her husband, right?
Right.
She's kind of made to believe that she's kind of crazy, right?
I think a lot of crazy shit happens as a result.
Okay.
But there's definitely some moments in there where there's internal struggle.
Yeah.
But just the way that movie carried it out, I think really hit the nail on the head. It's a very, very uncomfortable movie. I think a lot of people don't like it, and I understand. I know there was a lot of biblical imagery and a lot of biblical subtext in there, but I didn't see any of that when I first saw it. I was just like, fuck, this is what it's like with a woman's not being listened to.
You're kind of bringing up the fact there that contexts are whenever there's a text, there's three things going on: the author, the text, the reader, the text, and then the context. So the text is the film, you're the reader, and then the context is the political or sociological climate at the time or whatever. And if you as the reader don't have knowledge, if your pre-existing knowledge has something to do with biblical, then you can't read into it because you don't know that when you're watching it. But at the same time, you connected it to the experience of women and kind of that stereotypical experience of a woman of not being listened to. Which I think you're getting at the end of the day, part of our existence is the need to feel validated. Whether it's actually being heard by somebody or being told yes, your feelings are appropriate and you're not crazy for thinking that or whatever. I find that in past relationships that I've had, that was one of the biggest things that men in my life needed, was to be validated about their feelings and their life experiences.
Yeah, where'd that leave you though?
What do you mean? What role was I put in when I had to do that?
Yeah.
Well, it kind of put me in role of comforter, but at the same time, I'm a very nurturing person. I don't shy away from telling somebody that their feelings are valid and that that they're okay feeling that way. It's hard. It also is good too, because you're not the person just jamming a solution down their throats. You're the person to say yeah, it's okay to feel that way. I mean, I don't really have a negative idea or perception of it. I think it's positive, but it's all too easy to then be put in role of therapist girlfriend, which is not a good place to be in.
Oh, definitely not, because you also have your own feelings that you'd like to have validated, and you want to be listened to and heard as well. And fuck.
It's okay.
And I know when you're put in that situation, it can be really tough because if you're put in that, I understand shit goes down. We all have to be in that situation from time to time. But if it's a constant, and if it's like to the point where you can't even like go about your daily life because you're in a constant like savior like crisis mode, then that can easily like bring you down with the sinking ship.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like I've luckily not been in a relationship with a person who like was in that crisis mode where I had to be like soul savior and tell that individual like, you're okay, your feelings are valid, like don't worry. Like I wasn't the only person, but at the same time, like I think everybody needs you need like a core of people who you can go to and tell you that you're valid in your feelings or whatever. So, and I feel like it can be it's a really intimate experience too, like you feel so close when someone tells you like, yeah, your feelings are right or your thoughts are right and you should be able to do that or whatever. Like it's really affirming. So I do see like the negative sides of it though. It can easily, like depending on the person, be turned into something where again you're like therapist girlfriend or boyfriend rather than, you know, working on being more intimate as a couple. You're so focused on rebuilding and helping that other person that you're not focusing on yourself or you two as a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on both sides of that before, where I've you know, like just like I've been in a position where just being listened to like not only really helped me out, or listening to somebody really helped them out, but there have been some instances where it got to the point to where I just could not listen anymore because like the situation was just so volatile, and it, you know, you get to a point where it's like there's nothing, like even like listening isn't even effective. Saying something isn't effective, listening isn't effective, but the only person changing is you, and you're getting worse. And that's not a good place to be in. It's been very rare that I have been in that position, but I have been, and it really taught me a lot of things. And, you know, I'm still trying to like work through that and, you know, really become a better person out of it. But I have had those moments of weakness where I just couldn't be the listener anymore. Yeah.
And I think that it's hard because you have to like walk that line. Like how much validating can you really do, or how much, like if it's becoming like a daily thing where you have to tell your partner like validate them every single day, or else like they will have a breakdown or not be able to function, like that's not healthy at all. And it's hard too, like you were saying, that I think what you're getting at there is when communication doesn't work. Because when you validate somebody's feelings, at least like the way I feel like it works in a positive sense, is that you tell the person, it's okay that you're feeling that way. Like, you're right to feel that way. I would feel that way too, whatever kind of form that takes. Usually then the person who's being validated, it puts them at ease and it kind of ends it. But when you're validating somebody and it's not enough, then it can get really tiring and exhausting, because then if you're constantly validating but nothing's happening on their end, like you said, like you're the person changing because you're getting upset or having to not embody, but internalize like their emotion or their upsetness, or it's allowing, it's creeping into your relationship and infecting it and breeding resentment. Like you can't let that happen. But at the same time, like, yeah, I do think it's a really important part of intimacy is having those validating moments and moments of affirmation with each other, and not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships.
Definitely, because you can't just break up with a friend as easily. Like when shit goes bad with a friend, it seems like that hurts, you know, just as much as like losing like a relationship. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been in like a really long-term relationship. Actually, I haven't. But at least with the friends, you know, you care about them, especially if you've been friends with them for years and then shit just starts going south. Like that really hurts. And, you know, time does heal all that shit. But
it still sucks in the moment. Yes,
totally.
I started reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Mason, and he brought up the fact that physical and psychological pain are kind of perceived and processed in the same way by your body. So if you are having psychological pain, like he uses the example of like when his first girlfriend broke up with him, he felt like an ice pick was going through his heart, and it's because your body is actually perceiving all of that as like physical pain. So
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. I didn't see it like that. But, yeah, I would sometimes rather just have the physical pain because you could at least rest, like, with a broken leg, you know, or, like, just, like, hey, even, like, when I got out of surgery, I could just lay in bed and, you know, do nothing all day. And then literally every day I am guaranteed to be healed.
Yeah, or, like, when there's, like, an emotional pain, there's not, or a psychological pain, there's no one source. When your leg's broken, that's the source of the pain. We can fix that leg. But if you have just a general malaise or you're feeling depressed, like, there's usually layers upon layers and multiple sources that you have to sift through in order to feel better.
Yeah. No. And it really is a long, drawn-out process. And I found that when I was in those positions, there were a few times where I said the wrong thing, and not in terms of like wrong to hurt the person, but to give the person the wrong perception of the situation.
In what way?
So, you know, like, let's just say like this person knows that, like, you know that this person did something wrong, and you say they didn't do something wrong, but it's not like a misstep. You know, like, hey, that is fucked up. You should not have done that, you know, level. But then saying, you know, actually, yeah, that wasn't fucked up. You're totally fine. You're a great person. That is the hardest thing I think I'm, you know, trying to go through, because there is a tact within being honest, but I still think you can be honest and then supportive at the same time, because I don't think that you can truly support someone if you're dishonest.
Yeah, because if you aren't being honest, then what you are supporting them on is lies, which is, it's kind of harsh to say, but if you're not being 100% honest, then I think there's tact within honesty, but if you're not being honest, then, like, you're not really getting to the source of it, right? You're just kind of glossing over the issue.
Exactly. Glossing, because sometimes, like, issues are bigger than people in the moment, and if you were to address, and I think there's this quote from Patrice O'Neill. He was a comedian that passed away in 2011. He's one of my all-time favorites, but he did an interview where, you know, somebody said he was brutally honest. And he's like, why is telling the truth brutal? Like, there's nothing brutal about telling what you think is the truth. There's something brutal about lying. Nobody ever says that you're a brutal liar.
Yeah, that's true. I think it also goes back to, like, that tact. Like, I think you can be honest in a approachable way. I think it's harsh too, though, because, like, you shouldn't have to constantly couch what you're saying in how it's going to be perceived. Like, that's no way to live, because you're giving too many fucks about how it's going to be perceived, rather than you should be cared more about, like, why you need to say that or communicate that. But again, and I think maybe as a woman, I've been conditioned to, like, really consider how my audience is going to perceive things so I'm heard more. You know, that might be part of my experience that I'm, like, coming from. But I always try to be, like, really cognizant of how I'm saying something, or, like, because I never want to, my mission is never to offend somebody, especially if it's something that's, like, quote unquote brutally honest. Like, if I need to have a hard conversation with somebody, I want to make sure it's going to be received in the most positive way possible, where the person won't get offended or whatever. So, but again, like, I could be really unique in that way, like, or really conscious of, you know, things that I shouldn't be. Maybe I'm giving too many fucks about how people are going to perceive it. Yeah,
like, that situation happened to me I had a doctor's appointment a few weeks ago, and I gave the doctor the blessing to be 100% honest with me. And even then, she still found it really hard to tell me that I was overweight.
Really?
Yeah, really hard. I mean, I'm over 300 pounds. I know I'm overweight, and I know that the changes I want to make with my life have to deal with that. So I have to lose a lot of weight in order to actually be as healthy as I want to be. But even still, she was more like, well, how do I say this? Don't be offended, but according to the chart, you're obese class 2. And, you know, and I'm just like, just call me a fat piece of shit. I don't care. And she's like, and then, like, when I said that, she was like, yeah, you gotta lose weight. Like, but even still, like, just the fact that telling someone that they have to lose weight for their health in a doctor's office, Like, it wasn't saying, like, oh, I'm undesirable because I'm 300 pounds. It's like, Brent, you can't fucking breathe at night because you have all this weight on your chest.
Well,
you know?
I think that it's, again, like, being really cognizant of, like, you know, because words do hurt and have an impact, or they have the potential to hurt. So it's like, on the one hand, her cognizance of your feelings was admirable, but it got in the way of saying what needed to be said, which is, you know, via this chart, you are overweight. You obviously have come here talking to me about this stuff. Like, you know that your weight is, like, something that needs to be, you know, addressed or whatever. I think, again, it's like that weird line of, like, how many fucks do you give about how people are going to perceive the message? I think, again, it's like that weird line of, like, how many fucks do you give about how people are going to perceive the message? But again, I feel like you have to, like, at a certain point, you can't ignore how people are going to perceive it, because if you gave no fucks about it, there's a very good chance no one is going to be willing to listen. Like, for example, like, if since I don't eat, like, animal products, if I'm really cognizant of talking to people about veganism and how I approach it, like, I'm never going to be the person who says, like, well, you're a horrible fucking person because you eat animal products, and, like, do you know what happens to cows, and you know what happens in slaughterhouses, blah, blah, blah. Like, I have to be really cognizant of how my message comes across. Like, we had a potluck at work a few weeks ago, and I made, like, a batch of, like, these vegan dream bars, and a part of me wasn't even going to label them as vegan because I wanted people to, like, authentically try it and like it. And, you know, there's bake advocacy or cooking advocacy where you, like, give people some vegan food and be like, look, it's not just, like, plants and disgusting. I can make, you know, like, buffalo ranch things and pizza and whatever, and it's still good. And, like, winning them over that way versus beating them over the head with, like, hardcore facts of, like, how many animals are being slaughtered or whatever.
Yeah. The one thing I never really cared for with, like, the vegan stuff is the, like, blow-up doll advertisement with when it comes to the food. So, like, for instance, like, there's a restaurant in the city that has vegan food. So you have a chicken sandwich, like an authentic Santa Fe Mexican chicken sandwich. Mm-hmm. The cheese is squash, and then the bread, or, like, the bread is, like, made, I don't even know what the fuck the bread's made out of. The chicken is soy. But they're advertising it to you as, like, a chicken sandwich. Whereas, like, if you were to walk past a blow-up doll, it says, like, oh, realistic genitalia. It's like, it's a fucking piece of rubber.
You know, like, I think luckily most vegan foods moved away from the blow-up doll sandwich. Thank God. Maybe it's not, like, everywhere in the world. In Chicago, it certainly is good. But that's really funny, though.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I've had some great, like, one of the best vanilla shakes I have ever had in my whole life was a vegan vanilla shake, and it was labeled vegan vanilla shake.
Did you go to Chicago Diner?
I can't remember where it was, but I think it was something like that. It was in the city.
Was it Pick Me Up Cafe?
I think so, yeah. It was Pick Me Up. That was fucking amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
But some of this, like, you know, like, oh, like hamburger sliders. And then you read, like, and it's like, oh, like, this tastes like the real thing. Like, it's not the real thing, you know. It's like, okay, if you were to buy a CD of the White Stripes, mm-hmm. and you saw, like, the cover and everything, and then you buy it, and then you put the CD in, and it's just a band that sounds like the White Stripes, you'd be pissed, right?
No, of course. Well, like, I think it's difficult because, like, you always have to be cognizant of the fact that it's, like, a vegan interpretation of something. One of the, like, my favorite vegan cookbook author, Issa Chandra Moskowitz, talks about that. Like, she's like, for that very reason, like, it isn't hamburger meat, but this is, like, my vegan interpretation of, like, a burger, and I can call it a burger. It does, like, honestly, like, micro rant, it really fucking bothers me when people are like, it's not a burger, there's no cow in it, or it's not cheesecake, there's no dairy in it. Like, fuck you. This is my interpretation of a cheesecake, and it's made out of plants. Fuck you and eat it. It's still delicious.
Right, but call it a vegan cheeseburger. Don't just say it's a cheeseburger. Well,
here, you don't have to call it a vegan cheeseburger. Just put a Z instead of an S in cheeseburger. Or, like, my favorite is chicken, where it's like CHIK''N, or, like, fishless filet. Like, that's, yeah. But you know, the nomenclature doesn't bother me that much.
Right. I understand where you're coming from. because they're communicating like a certain form of dishonesty for you to try their product.
This is true, but also, is it dishonest, or are they working from, like, talking about pre-existing knowledge, are they working from that space? Because everyone's had a burger at some point in their life, at least in America. So if we call this like a burger, or you're at like a vegan shop and they call it a burger, and like you should know that it's like vegan because you're in like a vegan like restaurant or whatever, and it comes to you and it looks like a burger, it tastes like a vegan interpretation of a burger, is it gonna taste 100% the same? No. Even the what's it called, the Impossible Burger, have you seen that?
No.
It's a vegan burger that has the it's made out of pea protein, and it has the molecule hema in it, which is basically like plant blood. So it's like the vegan burger that bleeds, and it's supposed to be like the most meaty thing ever. And I tasted it, and it's probably the closest thing I've had to beef since I gave up meat when I was 18. So it tastes a lot like it, but it's still not the exact same. So like it's still a vegan interpretation of the burger. But it's never going to be 100% like that. The only thing that's usually like 100% like it is like chicken nuggets, because chicken nuggets are not real chicken.
No, I mean, people got pissed off at McDonald's when it came to be their chicken nuggets were actually like made of horse meat. So you were eating like a third place fucking horse that got shot in the head because it couldn't win those races.
I just remember when they made the switch to all white meat chicken nuggets. I do not remember horse meat. That was not in my brain when I was eating McDonald's.
Me either. So, but people were pissed that, because if they said horse meat nugget, no one would have bought the fucking thing.
Wait, you're telling me people wouldn't buy horse meat nuggets? Why?
Because people like horsies are cool. I mean, the people like horsies.
I'm gonna get accused of being like a very militant vegan when I start talking about like, well, where do you draw the line? A horse is like a cow, is like a chicken, is like a, where's the line? Cats and dogs we love, but we can eat chickens and cows and pigs, no problem, blah, blah, blah. Vegan, militant.
That's fine, but I just want there to be more. I mean, there's nothing wrong I've had with the food. Like, I've never had a bad vegan product. It's just, if it was labeled, I think it's important to have categories so like what you're getting. So then therefore, I don't like the bait and switch approach where you're eating. Okay, it's like the same tactic that they use with Rocky Mountain oysters at bars. People like at bars, they have Rocky Mountain oysters. Like, oh, what is it? This is fucking amazing. What is this? Oh, that's bull testicles.
But don't you know, like, is there really a person in the world who's had a Rocky Mountain oyster and didn't know it was a testicle?
That used, like, for the longest time, like, even still, a lot of people don't know what Rocky Mountain oysters are, but that's the only way you would get someone to eat it. Is after you taste it and it's good.
Well, but the thing is here, though, like, with vegan food, like, they're not, rarely is it like, okay, like, so if I made you a burger and I told you, like, Brent, I'm gonna actually cook meat, and then I gave it to you and you ate it, and I was like, ha, it was actually vegan. That's, like, a lot better than, like, ha, it was made out of testicles.
It's still a part of the animal that was, it's not like it was just raw bull balls filled with jizz.
Well, no, but it was still, I would not eat a testicle, so.
No, but, you kind of did the same thing with the Dream Bars.
I did. Well, yeah, and I did, because again, it's that, like, mindset. It is, like, a bait and switch, but it's also, like, because in, like, veganism, vegetarianism, like, no one wants to fucking try it because they think it can't be delicious. So it's kind of, like, at a certain point, like, I don't know. And it's, like, if it tastes good, like, who fucking cares? Like, eat it. It tastes good.
Yeah.
But I say that on, like, the vegan side of things.
I think, the vegan world, I think they would be a lot more successful with the food, actually, if they were honest. Because honesty is actually proven that a company could thrive with being Domino's. They said, our pizza fucking sucks, and then people would take pictures and say, look at how shitty this pizza was. They were honest, and they're in the top, maybe they're number one.
Well, I feel like vegan products are still honest. Like, Beyond Beef or Beyond Meat, like, it says right on there, like 100% plant-based protein. Like anytime you buy a vegan product, it's labeled as vegan or nut-free, soy-free. Plant-based is the big one now. So I don't, like, they're not trying to hide it. And I think it's, like, again, like, it's helpful to work from a frame of reference. Like, this is what, like, this is like a burger. Like, this is our interpretation of burger or whatever. So I feel like I don't think it's, like, dishonest, although I see what you're saying with, like, I only slightly see what you're saying with, like, the nomenclature and stuff of, like, I don't know. Because I feel like it's also exhausting to put vegan in front of everything. And then people then accuse you of talking about veganism even more because you keep saying it's vegan. And then you just want to, like, you know, fucking punch your lights out and die because you're so fucking sick of explaining it to people.
Well, you know, it's a different way that stuff's being prepared, so that's gotta come with the territory, like with gluten-free. Like, some people legitimately cannot have gluten because like, it would completely, like, fuck them up.
Well, yeah. But veganism isn't that unless you're, like, I mean, of course, like, some people are lactose intolerant and choose to be vegan or whatever, but no one's, I don't think there's actually a source, like, of people being allergic to, like, meat or whatever.
No.
But the whole point of this diatribe was that, like, it's, like, even with, like, something like veganism, you have to be conscious of your communications. Because if I just go off and start screaming about animal slaughter, no one's going to want to listen to me because I'm forcing them to acknowledge or think about, you know, a choice they make every day, consciously or unconsciously, causes the suffering of animals. Versus, I give you tasty food and then say, look, plants can be yummy. Don't eat animals.
Right. Well, that all goes back to tact, you know. Like,
yes.
Because if you were being militant about it, I mean, like, there's a lot of, like, strong negative emotion behind that, potentially. Like, especially, like, if you're saying, like, fuck you, you piece of shit, that you meat eater bastard face. Like,
well, so you're saying, like, you're, like, just using a lot of cuss words, which I think, again, goes to decorum. Like,
right.
like, if you disagree with somebody, like, again, the political sphere. Like, if you call someone, like, a fucking, like, Republican is such an insult. Like, all you have to say is that, like, these Republicans did something, and it's like, oh my god, it's like a slur. Like, I don't even, like, sure, I don't agree with a lot of Republicans, or like, I don't agree with, like, policies often that they endorse or whatever, but it's so stupid to, like, make the other party the enemy, because you just then sit on your fucking moral high ground and don't want to look at yourself.
Yeah.
End macro rant.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather be called racist than a Republican now. It's almost at that point.
Oh my god, no you wouldn't.
Yeah.
No you wouldn't. You'd rather be called a racist rather than a Republican?
Yeah. Okay, like, when was the last time someone won an Oscar for playing a reformed Republican?
Okay, wait. Are you referencing an actual movie?
Okay, like, American History X. History X. And
did that win an Oscar, though?
I don't know. I think Edward Norton was up. Matthew McConaughey for Dallas Buyers Club. He played what the fuck? What was the word that I just said?
A Republican?
Not a Republican, but he was like he started out as like a homophobe, you know, anti-gay.
And then reformed.
He's a reformed homophobe. And, you know, there's no movies about a reformed Republican.
Oh, I see. While I'm laughing at that, I still think it's much worse to be called a racist rather than a Republican.
I know, probably. I wouldn't want to, because, I mean, in certain spheres, if you said you were either, it would still be held very high.
Well, there's that, like, some people, the way that Republican is used is it's sometimes synonymous with racism and homophobia and transphobia and like all of the bad social things. But again, I feel like that's like, sure, there's individual Republicans and policies and maybe a percentage of them that support something, but the party itself doesn't stand for that. But then again, like in the cultural sphere, it is like, that is a slur, calling someone a Republican, because it becomes synonymous with, like, old male white guys who are, you know, homophobic and racist and whatever. So, again, it's funny because we're kind of illuminating there with the example that communication always evolves. Language always evolves. There's always new connotations being assigned to specific words. like Republican in America's history wasn't always, synonymous with this idea of old white men passing laws that only benefit them. I feel like that's the image now, that's the connotation. So it's always evolving.
We will be back next time with Coffee and Catastrophe with Brent and Gabi. So in the meantime, you guys take care of yourselves and be good to each other.